Well, hi, my name is Bey Logan. Welcome to the Hong Kong Legends DVD release of Wheels on Meals, one of my all-time favorite Jackie Chan movies, and I'm as excited to talk about it now as I was to first see it in a theater in Leicester Square way back in 1984. Here's the logo for Fortune Star on the screen. Wheels on Meals, aka Fai Chan Chair. Fai meaning fast, Chan is food, and chair is car, so it's fast food car. And this movie, a real groundbreaker for Jackie Chan. Here's the old Golden Harvest logo. They should never have changed it. I love hearing the music. I love seeing the logo. Reminds me of the glory days of this particular film company and all the amazing movies they were making throughout the 80s. And the first building that we're going to see, which is in Barcelona, where the whole of the film is set, where the whole of the film was shot over a 4-month period, that building there is El Temple Expiatory de la Sagrada Familia, the expiatory temple of the Sacred Family, which was designed and built by the genius Italian architect Antoni Gaudi. And his architecture actually plays a very key role in this film, so I'll mention his buildings as we see them throughout the film. Credits for Jackie Chan and Yuen Bu, the two leads of the film, nowhere to be seen in the opening, because I think at the time the film came out, that the tradition was that when an actor first appeared on screen, you'd actually get his name appearing on screen in writing next to the face of the actor concerned. Then you got Yuen Bu just then with the Ghetto Blaster. You can kind of tell what period the film is in the 80s from the size of the telephones and the music playing devices. And also Jackie with that little mask. He always likes to wear those. In reality, he gets them on airplanes and does wear them when he wants to get a nap. This was a great sight gag. I remember this getting a big laugh in the theatre. The idea of the two apparent rooms actually being one. And we get this quick flashback here to the wonder days of Prodigal Son by Gajai, as Yuen Bu is showing off his Wing Chun dummy technique there. And this is kind of a fun moment here with Jackie. All we get from him is one double gan sao, and then we had to wait all these years until 1996 to see him finally working the dummy in Rumble in the Bronx. This movie, actually, we get to see the beginning. We're really setting the transition from kung fu to kickboxing, because they start off using the dummy for a few of those traditional kung fu movements, and then we're into kickboxing. So immediately, right off the bat, Sammo Hung defining what is going to be the action style, not just of this film, but of the new era, and establishing his two guys as kind of these fighting fit young fellas living in Spain. They're running a fast food van, but they're also training every morning. So there's a logic to why they would be able to fight like they do. Mention the music score. There are actually two very different scores for the film. One composed by the veteran Hong Kong composing team of Chris Babida and Tang Siu Lam, and an English score by Keith Morrison. And they're very different scores, and one is a more Asian theme and one is more international. And there was also different songs on the Japanese version of the film. The Japanese version of the Jackie Chan movies made in Hong Kong at that time were always slightly different to the versions that you saw released in Hong Kong. Look at these guys in fine form and at the top of their game. So, as I mentioned before, the whole film shot in Barcelona over a 4-month period. Quite a challenge, because at that time, Jackie spoke some English, Yuen Bu not much, Sammo not really that much, and here they were shooting in Spain, where English, even in Spain, is like a second language, so people aren't really speaking English that fluently. So you had kind of 3 or 4 languages operating on the set, and it was like kind of Tower of Babel. But I think everybody's pulling in the same direction under Sammo's guidance, so obviously it wasn't that much of a challenge for them. The title, Meals on Wheels, originally it was called Wheels on Meals, much like the service that we're all familiar with that delivers food to the elderly and to the handicapped. And what happened is there had actually been 2 films released by Golden Harvest that have flopped. One was a Ménage à Trois, which was a comedy with David Niven, and the other was Megaforce, which was this kind of big action picture with Hal Needham directing. Both of them performed really badly, and so it was decided that M was an unlucky letter to start a Golden Harvest title with. So it became, from Wheels on Meals, became Meals on Wheels. And I think I was the first person to break that story. I was told it by David Shepherd, who was the head of distribution based out of London for Golden Harvest for many years. I don't know if he's still with us, but he was a wonderful old man and somebody who helped me out a lot when I was first researching Hong Kong films. And he told me that that was why the film had this extraordinary title of Wheels on Meals. The film itself was released August 17th, 1984, and released and earned $21.4 million in Hong Kong is a major hit. That's actually a very rare moment then, somebody doubling for Yuen Biao. Normally, Yuen Biao is the guy they pull in as the all-purpose double for other people, but actually there was somebody doubling for him for The Fall. And you actually find throughout the film, whenever you get a moment when Jackie or Yuen Biao is actually performing a movement where their spine has to slam into the ground, you get a double. And the reason that you do that is that actually when you look at the martial arts and all the other acrobatic movements, you can actually kind of perform these again and again and again, and even though there is some wear and tear, you can keep going. But when you're actually repeatedly slamming your spine into a solid object, take after take, it's pretty hard to get up and keep running around doing further action. So there's a tendency when you get any of that kind of stunt, you get a double in, and it's not because these guys physically couldn't do it, it's just because it's harder to recover and to carry on with whatever you're doing. You need some recovery time because you're going to be bruised, because of course, even though we only see one final take in the finished film, the actual stuntman will have jumped off the front of that store a bunch of times and slammed down into the street below. Another thing noticed in this movie is everyone's wearing primary colours all the time. I got a theory that Jackie and Yuen Biao and Sammo were all hit round the head so often when they came up as stuntmen that now their eyes only really register ridiculously bright colours. So you get everybody's wearing different yellow. I mean, Sammo has a very nice yellow hat later in the film, and of course the van itself, the actual Fai Chan chair of the title, has a particularly lurid yellow colour. I think it's to kind of just kind of give the film a whole summer feeling. This was a huge summer release in Hong Kong and hugely appreciated by the audience. People really wanted to go and see a movie like this because it had a mixture of comedy, it had kung fu, and also pretty girls. And this is what you look for when you saw the names Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, and Yuen Biao above the title. Should mention that Yuen Biao, though he was known at the time as Bill, was referred to by Golden Harvest in the credits as Jimmy Yuen Biao, because they were trying to launch him as kind of a skinnier version of Jackie. So they had Jackie Chan, and it was Jimmy Yuen Biao. But he himself never even knew that was his stage name, and people would come on and say, "Hi, Jimmy, how are you?" And he would look around and see who they were talking to, because as far as he was concerned, his name was Bill Yuen. That Yuen Biao, the Biao of Yuen Biao, was kind of translated as Bill. His Sammo with the perm, which is Sammo Hung, the director and star of the movie. And you also see him with a similar hairstyle in the movie Pantyhose Hero, one of the latter Sammo Hung films that's kind of vanished off the face of the earth. But it was a kind of remake of a movie called Partners with Ryan O'Neal and John Hurt, with Sammo and Alan Tam, and he had the same hairstyle. And Sammo, of course, a legend in Hong Kong action cinema and known to international audiences for his work on the CBS TV series Martial Law. Still very much on the scene, and I just worked with him on a film called Dragon Squad. So here is a character called Moby, obviously referring to his whale-like proportions. And it's interesting the way he's kind of set himself a little bit apart from the other two guys. You've got like Jackie and Yuen Biao partners, and Sammo's kind of walking his own road as a detective. But all of the stuff that we see here shot on location in Hong Kong is Herb Edelman. Now, Herb Edelman, everybody, TV fans remember him, I think, for his role in Golden Girls, where he was like a regular on that show. Born 5th November 1933 in Brooklyn, New York, and he died in 1996 of emphysema in Woodland Hills, California. Really interesting and long career in cinema and television in America, a character actor. For some reason, he had this kind of odd Asian thread to his career during his latter years. He was in the Sidney Pollack-directed movie The Yakuza with Robert Mitchum and Takakura Ken that was shot on location in Japan and also on studios in L.A. And beyond that, he also starred in one of the Tora-san movies. Now, the Tora-san films are a whole long series of movies shot in Japan, starring this character called Tora-san, who was like everybody's favorite uncle, who bumbled along and got into all these misadventures. And in one of them, Tora-san's Dreams of Spring, there's a kind of a comedy of errors because Tora-san's always trying to get married, even though he's kind of a bit past marrying age. And there's a Japanese term that sounds like a beautiful young flower, and in fact, it actually means there's a Westerner, there's an American staying in the house. So he hurries home expecting to meet a beautiful young girl, and instead he meets Herb Edelman. So Herb Edelman working in the Yakuza and on Tora-san's Dreams of Spring, and here he is in Sammo Hung's film Wheels on Meals. So he's got this 3 interesting Asian-themed films in the middle of his career. Sammo told me that basically he just was familiar with Herb Edelman's work. Maybe he'd seen him in Yakuza, and they just picked up the phone and called his agent or manager. The same way they hired the bad guys for this film, Keith Vitale and Benny Akitas. They called LA, said, "We want these guys to be in the movie," and that was that. Herb Edelman, something that Sammo and Herb Edelman have in common. They were both in movies called Odd Couple. Herb Edelman was in the original one with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. Of course, Sammo was in the Odd Couple that starred him and Lau Gao-wing. So two very different films with the same title. And also Herb Edelman in the James Coburn, James Bond spoof, In Like Flint, and a regular on the TV series and elsewhere, and Golden Girls. And that's all we see of him. That's his cameo in the film, but still kind of fun. And some of the stuff with Sammo kind of plays, I think, a little flat to international audiences. Some of the comedy, some of the non-physical comedy doesn't really play as well as it would for Hong Kong audiences, because a lot of it's dependent on the language and the delivery. The other thing I like about Sammo, though, is that even when he's doing exposition or even when there's dialogue, he always finds an interesting way to shoot the sequence so that there's movement or an interesting camera angle. You hardly ever see very static shots, very talky shots. And you can compare him with another action director like Stanley Tong, and Stanley has his strong points. One thing Stanley tends to do is when there's not action on the screen, when there are people talking, it's all very static. And I noticed with Sammo that it's very unusual for him to have static shots. He'll always try to find stuff to do, bits of business to do in the midst of all the dialogue, so that it's kind of broken up, so that the camera keeps moving, so the story keeps moving along. And at this stage of his career, his nickname was Dai Go Dai, which basically means biggest of big brothers. Like Dai Go is big brother, so Dai Go Dai would be like big brother big. So it was like implying that even though Jackie Chan was a big brother, bigger still than he was Sammo. And Sammo was really at the height of his powers at Golden Harvest. And you notice what's interesting is that in the case of both Jackie Chan and Yuen Biao, they both do their best work when directed by Sammo. I think the reason for that is that Sammo himself was the natural successor to Bruce Lee in terms of sheer martial arts choreography and martial arts movie making. But Jackie and Yuen Biao both had their strength in terms of comedy and filmmaking and acrobatics and stuff, but in terms of pure martial arts, Sammo was the guy. So what he would do is, because he was the big brother and nobody could say no to him, he would actually get hold of these guys and say, this is how the choreography is going to be, and you guys are going to do it till you get it right. And that is why when you see them working for him, nobody dares to say no, and therefore he does... they do their best work. There's an old saying, art is born of constraint and dies of freedom. And I think there's something to be said for that. When you're constrained by Sammo, you're pushed to do your best work. So here's leaping into frame, all the car action stunts choreographed by the late, great Blackie Ko Xiaoliang. And here we are at the Pueblo de Español, which means the village of Spain, which is an area in Barcelona where you have all the different architecture of all the different areas of Spain are represented. And they had a lot of cooperation from the local filmmaking authorities. That they got all these extras, and they got to take over this area. And I used to have a very good friend of mine. Shout out to my friend Sophie Newick. She used to live in Barcelona, and I went to visit her, and the geek that I am, I actually went to visit all the locations. All this stuff in the van, very much Aces Go Places. Aces Go Places, Joy Kai Pat Dong, was a series of movies shot around about the same time as these movies were being made, starring Carl Mac-Gar and Sam Hui, and they were like spoof Bond movies, but I think this is very much in the trend of this is more like Aces Go Places than the kind of comedy that you normally see from Jackie and Sammo. And later, even when you start using all the gadgets in a car chase, it's even more Aces Go Places. But the area that we're seeing here, as I say, representing all the architecture of Spain. And one thing I will say about this movie, sometimes when you see foreign filmmakers shooting, you feel that they haven't really got the best of the location because they're not familiar with it. By the way, I mentioned the skateboarding stunt double for Jackie, and there's Shigeru Ishihara, who was also his skating double for Winners and Sinners, and I believe also did the skateboard work on the later film City Hunter. So every time you like now, when you can't really see very clearly that it's Jackie, it's actually a Japanese skateboard and skating expert who was called in to double and choreograph those sequences. As I say, with this movie, I really feel we get to see the best of Barcelona, and particularly a lot of the work of this fantastic architect who I wasn't familiar with before I was researching the movie. Began to see, looked a lot of his work, Antoni Gaudi, and it's well worth looking on the internet or even going to Barcelona and seeing it for yourself. But he truly was an extraordinary architect, and I wasn't familiar with his work, but I am now. I don't know whether it was a conscious thing, but throughout the film we get to see Gaudi architecture. And I think one reason is because it's so striking visually. All these little sight gags which really add texture to the film. And if you looked at all of the American-made martial arts pictures being made during this era, or even some of the Hong Kong ones, none of them had this much stuff going on. What I mean is, even when there was not martial arts fights going on, you didn't have this much fun and games. And the guy in the middle there, doing the kick with the mohawk is the wonderful Blackie Ko Xiaoliang, originally from China but raised in Taiwan. And there he is with his, I love the Motorhead logo. You'll see it later. He has it on the front of his bike. And he was like definitely China's greatest. He was the Evil Knievel of China. Hong Kong, China's greatest motorcycle and car stuntman. Born 1953 in China, died 9th of December 2003, Shanghai, China. I think he had a stroke after an all-night drinking session. But he was a wonderful man. He lived in Taiwan and then took up motorsports at the age of 16, began racing professionally, and after that got into movies. And you can see him in like early films like The One-Armed Boxer with Jimmy Wong Yu. He plays a Thai boxer in that film. And he always had a very dark complexion, hence his nickname. And he actually directed the same year that this movie was made, in 1984. He actually shot a film called Invincible for Golden Harvest. It was not a very successful film. It was about the Foreign Legion. It was shot on location in Europe and Africa and also in Hong Kong, and had Billy Blanks, the founder of Taibo, was in it. But he directed that movie, but he worked on many films as a stuntman, did the motorcycle stunts for Jackie in The Police Story in the end when he crashes through all the glass, and he did all the stunt work that we see in this film. He was famous. His most famous stunt was when he used a modified Mitsubishi to jump 50 meters over the famous Yellow River in China. And this was like to celebrate the handover of Hong Kong back to China in 1997. He was also, it's hard to believe looking at him in films, but he was actually a singer. He sang in the native Taiwanese dialect. And so there was a big market in Taiwan. I mean, there was, for many years, that culture, the Aboriginal people's culture of Taiwan was kind of suppressed by the Kuomintang. And then in more recent years, it's come back to the fore, and you have people like Ah Mei, Sherry Cheng coming out and really talking about the ethnic background of the native peoples of Taiwan, and songs in their language have become popular. And he was one of the first guys to come out and do that. There's the Motorhead logo is very visible. But it's kind of cool. It's kind of a bit of a reach, the idea of having this kind of Chinese Hell's Angel in Barcelona, but it's kind of fun. First chance to see the guys in action. There's Chingal up there taking a hit on behalf of the Spanish stuntman who was riding the motorbike. This is great stuff. Look at that. Now look at Jackie when he comes up here. That's a real connection. Bang! Guy coming off. And that's just really, you look at that, slow motion, physical, bang, the effects. And it's like we kind of see there's a new era of action, it's moved on from the days doing kung fu. Oh, this was kind of fun. And it's one of the movies, actually, I remember the English dub of this film is not too bad. And if you have time, maybe take a listen to it, because I know most people now prefer the Chinese version with subtitles. But the English dub of this is quite fun, and this whole thing about my mother said, no fighting for me. No fighting, she said. And then he walks off. It's kind of cool. So that's his characters out of the movie, but his work is not, because there's a fair few stunt sequences later in the film, and you see those are choreographed by him. So he's great. Another thing about this movie that's kind of its time is the fact that everybody speaks Chinese. And the last movie I think they got away with that in Hong Kong just about was Mr. Nice Guy. But it was like, I think a lot of people even in Hong Kong, started saying, gee, why are all the Westerners speaking Chinese in these movies? There should have really been more of a clash of culture and people not being able to speak the same language. All of these scenes were shot in Spain. I remember when I first saw the movie and I was like, gee, did they really fly out? We're about to see some famous Hong Kong comedic actors. I'm like, did they really fly all these guys out to Spain for these short scenes? Maybe they were shot in Hong Kong. But actually, here's Richard Mu Han, key member of the Lucky Stars troupe, also visible in pretty bad TV movie of The Monkey King that was on recently, and also he was in Tomb Raider, and divides his time now between London, which is where he has a home, and still working occasionally in Hong Kong films. But a fantastic actor. I mean, you know, in my mind, a great comic actor, but somebody, I guess, because he's working in Hong Kong kung fu movies or working in Hong Kong action films, never really was regarded in the same breath as some of the great international comedians, you know, like Peter Sellers and these guys. But I mean, I think him on his best day he was an amazing comedian, very imaginative, starred in many movies as well as being a supporting actor in the Lucky Stars pictures. Great deadpan. In this movie, he used to great effect. And I remember thinking how funny this whole sequence was when I first saw it in the theatre, the idea that this guy coming out and pointing out to them that there's a big difference between being emotionally unbalanced or mentally unstable and being stupid. So it was like, got a big laugh in the theater when it first played. And I'm so glad. I mean, I'm glad you can see this film on DVD. I'm sad in a way that more people in this generation can't get to see a film in the theater with an audience, which is, of course, how these films deserve to be seen. And you get that kind of community enjoyment. And I mean, I think these films particularly were enjoyable because you'd be laughing at the gags and gasping at the action, and it was like a real kind of a group, an audience experience. It was really a kind of participatory experience. And those days, I guess, are kind of gone because we don't have film shows anymore. Kind of fun. I really think that that kind of top that Yuen Biao's wearing is very much, again, very 1980s kind of techno. It's the kind of thing you'd be wearing if you were in Human League. There's Wu Ma, actor-director, former protege of Jung Jit at Shaw Brothers. Also worked in some of the Lucky Stars movies. Directed Sammo in Dead or the Deadly. I always remember him. I'm in the role I always think of him from as the guy in Prodigal Son who wants to attack Yuen Biao Leung Jan at the beginning of Prodigal Son. And he says, "My iron fist has found its target." And he's great. Recently seen, live and well, recently seen in the movie House of Fury, directed by Stephen Fung Dutlan. There's John Shum on the side of the frame just there on the bed. And there's Paul Chang Jung. Hard to believe, actually, looking at how he grew to be this character actor, but he was actually launched by Shaw Brothers as a Chinese James Bond in the movies Golden Buddha and Black Falcon. But you see him more as a mature character player in the films Duel to the Death and Shanghai Express, both of which were Golden Harvest movies. So he kind of like, as he matured, he became this kind of quiet, gentle character player. But in his younger days, he was running around with a gun and really kind of doing the whole 007 thing, 007 Hong Kong style. So a lot of these old Shaw Brothers movies now being released on DVD, so you can get to see him in his glory days. John Shum, Shumkin Fun. Hard to believe that this lunatic who we see here, who plays these wacky characters in the Lucky Stars movies, was a real pro-democracy activist in the post-Tiananmen Square era, and is still very, very outspoken figure on the in the pro-democracy camp in Hong Kong. Recently seen in a cameo in Jackie Chan's movie New Police Story. Another thing that I thought they did very well with this movie, a lot of the times when Jackie shot films in in Australia, he would really, for some reason, find the worst actors known to man. And here they actually went to some effort, and a lot of the actors who you see playing supporting roles are actually established Spanish television and film actors. But and everybody seems to be a proper actor coming in and delivering a performance, which is not something you can say of all the films that you see shot overseas. And again, a wonderful chance to see this park here in Barcelona, and every opportunity taken to show the wonderful natural beauty of the city. And here's one of the natural beauties, which is the lovely Lola Fauna, who was to become like the favorite actor of these guys as she turns up again in Armor of God, a later Jackie Chan film shot in Europe. She had been a Miss Spain prior to this and starting her career as an actor. She was actually the Miss Spain in 1979, and her full name is Maria Dolores Fauna, and known in Cantonese as Lolai Fongla. And born 6th of June 1960. I always think it's a bit ungenteel of me to be giving a lady's name, but that's the year she's born. And born in Alicante in Spain. And again, just really when they went to Spain, they wanted a lovely local lady and went to a casting agency, and there's this girl who wanted to be in films. And she's still working in movies. Recent films included a movie called No, or The Vainglory of Command. And she works in Spanish television series and films. And you've got like this kind of comedy of errors here as we try to establish what exactly is the relationship between her and Yuen Biao's father. But she was lovely. I mean, there was some on-set miscommunication because she really spoke Spanish and at the time limited English, and the guys spoke Chinese and limited English. So there was always a bit of kind of miscommunication. But obviously, they still had a good relationship because she was later called back to play Jackie's love interest in Armor of God, which he starred in with Alan Tam, the singer Alan Tam, and that was shot in Europe some years later. This is kind of breaking new ground by having the idea of a Chinese Western romance, which was kind of slightly frowned upon at the time. I look at the way these guys. It's funny. I'm joking about the way they're dressed, but I think I saw them wearing the same outfits walking down the street in Chim Sa Choi just the other day. Jackie still has his own very distinctive clothing style, and it's uniquely him, and he gets away with stuff that I think few of the rest of us could. And God knows, I myself am no I'm not a clothes horse by any means. DP for the film, my old friend Arthur Wong Ot-tai, who was the DP for My Lucky Stars, Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars. First Mission, which is, I think, my favourite movie that he shot, I mean, in terms of looking at his style of cinematography. And, of course, I got to work with him for 3 long years on The Medallion. And the other DP on the film is Chung Yu-jo, who was also the DP on Project A, Police Story, and Dragons Forever. So they both kind of shared duty as DP, as the sipping see, on these films. On this film. Hard to believe that this movie was nominated for Best Action and lost out to Project A. And I think Project A is a fantastic film, but I think in terms of pure action, this movie really leaves it standing. So I guess, I don't know, maybe there's politics involved, but Project A won that year. I guess, it was the same team. But for my money, Wheels on Meals, action-wise, in terms of pure on-screen martial arts action, really was in a class of its own and remains so to this day. Look at the big Mitsubishi logo getting a plug there. This time, as now, Jackie was Mr. Mitsubishi, and so you always, and a more loyal brand guy you'll never find. There's logos, look at that one on the top of the screen there, logos all over the place, because he really, when he came in and supported Mitsubishi, every time you saw him using a car in a movie, it was a Mitsubishi. Even somebody else driving a car, it would be a Mitsubishi. And that was kind of the thing that he always put in his movies, because he had the ongoing deal with the Japanese car company. This area, I don't know whether the authorities in Spain or in Barcelona really appreciated the fact that this red light area was depicted in such detail, but I guess they went along with it. I don't know that there is such a place in Barcelona, but they certainly go to great detail to establish it. And another thing, as I mentioned before, the great thing, all the character players in the film are playing very true, even though they're dubbed. I mean, it's odd, isn't it? You can kind of see bad performances even through dubbing. When you see somebody kind of who's not really there, who's not really in the moment, playing a character and doesn't have any kind of motivation to be in a particular scene, you can kind of tell. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Hong Kong films, particularly those shot overseas, where you see they've just basically dragged people in off the street to be in the movie, and it's to the detriment of the film when it's released internationally. Script co-written by Jackie Chan's regular writer, Edward Tang. Edward Tang's a wonderful guy, still works out of the JC offices every day developing ideas, and he really was the one guy who could come in and work with Jackie to string together all the wild and wacky ideas that Jackie and Sammo would have and try to bring them into some kind of cohesive whole, so that the film itself would work as in terms of like having a narrative structure, and that was his great strength as a scriptwriter. But he was working throughout this era, and has to be said for Jackie, he's got tremendous loyalty. I mentioned Mitsubishi and loyalty to Edward Tang, and also other members of his team. They've been with him for so many years now, and he kind of really does all he can to support them. Many of the exteriors, by the way, that we're seeing here are shot in the Barri Gothic, or the Gothic Quarter, which is a particularly stylish area of Barcelona, and it films very well. And I think Sammo made a conscious effort when he came to Spain that when he had backdrops, he really wanted to really highlight the fact that we're in Europe, we're in Spain, that they weren't just shooting parts of Hong Kong and saying and cheating it like has been done in the past. People have shot Hong Kong for US, for Spain, for other places. This kind of plays back, incidentally, this whole thing about the girl being a hooker. There's a little reference here, I guess, back to Bruce Lee's movie Way of the Dragon. If you remember, in that film, he meets an Italian lady of the evening, and she takes him to a room, and they get this whole thing happening. So it was like kind of that whole thing about you go to a foreign country and you kind of encounter the first woman you encounter is going to be a prostitute. That was kind of something that I guess Bruce Lee established when he did Way of the Dragon. So there's a couple of little references, I think, to other films that have been shot overseas. So I'll reference those as we go along. Again, all the backdrop lights, the Mitsubishi logo and things, all put in specially for the film. The backdrop here in the Gothic Quarter is as is. There's no studio work. Basically, everywhere you're seeing is a physical location that's been redressed for the movie. And they don't think did a fantastic job of kind of incorporating the props and the different elements needed for the particular comedy and action sequences. But at the same time, it's all shot in a real environment. You haven't got a studio where you can blow stuff up. The car stunts are performed on real streets where you had to shut off the traffic. So obviously they had the full cooperation of the Barcelona or the local film bureau to allow that. So you get all these kind of streets shut off to allow the filming to happen. And Sammo actually was talking in an interview, talking about the difference between filming in Hong Kong and filming in Spain. He says at the time that you made this movie, shooting any of this kind of stuff in Hong Kong would have been next to impossible. Firstly, because these guys were so famous, they could really not walk the streets with impunity. Secondly, if you tried shooting in Hong Kong, you couldn't get a permit, and the police would chase you down the street, saying, treating you like a bank robber. So when they went to Europe, there was this great freedom, because you'd basically go to the local film office and say, would like to shoot a movie, and they would say great, and allow you to shoot wherever you wanted to, and you could get permission and do what you wanted to. So this is like, I think, why increasingly through this era you saw Jackie and Sammo filming overseas more and more. I mentioned before, the film made $21.4 million on its first release in Hong Kong. Major hit. Look at Sammo's outfit here. It's great, the kind of Godfather thing. And again, this guy, what a great actor. A great young character player comes in and he plays it absolutely right, plays the right beats. He's saying, all right, he's speaking in dubbed Cantonese, but he's saying, hey, look at this outfit. Are you going to a funeral? This is kind of fun, finding a room full of guys who are fatter than Sammo. And they're knocking about the red wine and the sangria. And let me tell you, we had a goodbye party the other day for Maggie Q, my old partner and friend, and we were at a Spanish restaurant, and that sangria, it sneaks up on you. So I particularly feel for Sammo today when I see this scene. I think I'm still feeling the effects of the sangria from the other night. But sangria, for those of you not familiar, it's kind of a blend of wine and fruit, and very potent, and a classical Spanish drink, traditional Spanish drink, and one that gets knocked back. This scene cut from the international print of the films. What tended to happen is you would have the Hong Kong print, which had the full action and full comedy. You would have a slightly amended print for the Japanese market, and you would have like the NGs, you had the outtakes at the end. That was part of the contract. And sometimes another song, a different song, because Jackie was such a big recording star in Japan. So you might have a different song over the end credits, and different end credits, you'd have the outtakes. That would be the Japanese version. And slight trims to kind of like really more cultural things for the Japanese audience. Then you have the international version, and that would take out a lot of the comedy like this and just stick with the action. But this is kind of fun. Look at these guys. They're all really, really good character players. And it's kind of funny, this whole gag of them going in there. He's saying, I'm looking for a fat guy. And all of these guys are just huge. I mean, these are like extras from The Sopranos. And he's going in and doing this big kind of gangster thing. What I like about the movie is the fact that the Chinese kind of really, generally, there's no racist thing. They all interface with, they've been totally assimilated, much like people who open restaurants and other businesses in Europe. They've been totally assimilated into the community, and they're very friendly with the local Westerners. And I think this was really a good image and a good thing to communicate to the Hong Kong audience, because Hong Kong people can be quite insular. So I think these films kind of opened up people to the idea of traveling and experiencing other cultures. So that was kind of a little fun detour, but one that was pretty much cut from the international print of the films. And there's a few other scenes also that were cut from different versions, and I'll point them out as we go on. Again, this all alive. This is actually an actual location that's been taken over for the evening, and they put in all the actors in the restaurant, but actually a real restaurant. And no time were they shooting on studio sets. They were doing the whole thing kind of live as it happened on the streets of Barcelona. And I think to this day the film actually works as a really good picture postcard of the city. And I guess if Jackie Chan fans in Europe, if you're going to visit a city, Barcelona would be the one, because I think probably this is the Jackie picture or the Sammo movie where the city itself is such an obvious character in the film. So this sequence here, kind of very broad comedy, and there are a couple of, I'm used to watching a lot of Hong Kong movies, but there's a lot of comedic moments that I think really probably played better when you're watching it with a lively audience, or my old kind of standby of like the 9 guys and a pizza and a 6-pack of beer on a Friday night. I think if you're watching it in isolation, there's a tendency to fast forward through some of this stuff and get to the action beats. Certainly that's what I did after the first couple of viewings. But this is kind of stuff that local audiences really like. And you've got to bear in mind, Hong Kong audience, the initial audience that these films were intended for, was not necessarily the most educated and discerning audience. So you really needed to play to the broadest possible spectrum. So they really want broad physical comedy and nothing too sophisticated. And so some of the time, sometimes I guess it does cross the line and become kind of outrageous. But that's like the best adornment to a wooden dummy we were going to see in Hong Kong cinema until Michelle Yeoh played Wing Chun many years later. So you get this kind of like little conflict of interest, kind of like crossed purposes here. But kind of another fun thing about the movie is that, or something interesting about the film is the fact that even though we're in a country where I guess people have guns in Spain, we actually very rarely this sequence here with the lady with the shotgun is one of the few times that we actually see handguns in the movie. Most of the time, everybody's using hand-to-hand fighting. So that's kind of, I guess, you accept that when you go into the world of martial art movies, that people aren't necessarily going to pull out guns all the time. Something worth pointing out, obviously, a decision that was taken at the get-go that you weren't really going to have any gunplay. You won't have guns featured in the film. What I also like to see in this movie was the interplay between Jackie and Yuen Biao, because if you saw them in Project A, they were really kind of at odds, so you didn't really get to see any of their kind of brotherly chemistry. People who don't know, of course, Sammo, who we're seeing here, Jackie Chan and Yuen Biao were all students of Master Yu Jim Yun at the Peking Opera Academy, and that's where they learned all their incredible skills before coming into the film industry, initially as stuntmen, then as actors, stunt coordinators, and then Sammo, of course, becoming a director, Jackie becoming a director, and Yuen Biao kind of directing pictures, never really getting to that level as a filmmaker. But that was their flight path. But they'd all worked together since they were kids, very young children, hence the fact that they had this unique timing, this unique relationship on camera. And I don't think you'll ever see any performers in Hong Kong who have the same kind of understanding between each other. Like Sammo says, when they would work together, a lot of the times you really wouldn't need to say anything. You wouldn't need to, you just look at each other and you would know. And when you did fights, even fights with complicated martial arts action sequences, they would be easy because these guys have been like reading each other's rhythms for so many years in doing the opera movements. This shot actually cut from a number of prints, even though it's a double and even though it's it's double of Lola Fauna. It's not Lola Fauna, but even that shot from this shot of the silhouette of her in the shower was cut from some Asian prints because in some territories even that would be considered too risque. So you always have different versions of the films, and people are always asking me, well, why wasn't this version preserved? Why wasn't that? Because nobody ever knew the day would come when we'd sit back and go, gee, we're going to do a DVD release and we want to release a definitive version of the film. It was just a case of you make the film and you adjust it for each market to try to make as much money as possible in each market, and that was the only motivation, and there was no real sense of like we're creating something timeless for posterity. So let's talk a bit more about Lola Fauna, who I mentioned before was born in Alicante in Spain. Those of you who criticize my pronunciation of Cantonese and Japanese terms, you ain't seen nothing yet, as I'm going to speak some Spanish. I always think she looks a lot like Carol Bouquet, the actress who was in the James Bond movie For Your Eyes Only. But she had followed the flight path, actually, of many of the co-stars of Jackie Chan in Hong Kong. Somebody who'd been a beauty contest a beauty contest contestant, and gone on from that to being an actress, the same flight path taken by Maggie Zhou Manyuk, who's a co-star in many of Jackie's films. It was actually a very common way for people to get into the film industry in Hong Kong was to join one of the beauty pageants like Miss Hong Kong or Miss Asia. So, as mentioned before, Maria Dolores Fauna, or Lola Fauna, as she's known, was Miss Spain in 1979. Her Cantonese name, Lolai Fongla. And the same year that she won Miss Spain, she starred in the drama La Familia Bien Gracias, which is The Family Fine Thanks, which was directed by the prolific Spanish filmmaker Pedro Masso. And she went on to star in a miniseries, Los Desastres de la Guerra, The Disasters of War. And in 1981, an action called El Lobo Negro, The Black Wolf, which was directed by Rafael Romero Marchant, who had also directed some spaghetti westerns and some of those wonderful old masked wrestler movies, the Santos films. So I guess this kind of work stood her in good stead for doing a movie with a Hong Kong team, because those are the kind of the European equivalent of Hong Kong martial arts action movies and masked wrestler films and the spaghetti westerns. She was in a movie called Gritos de Ansiedad, Shouts of Anxiety, directed by José Luis Moreno, who had an amazing career directing very much the European equivalent of Hong Kong action films. He'd done films, Spanish equivalents of American originals, like Robin Hood, The Invincible Archer, 2 movies with the character of Zorro, who, even though he's like an Hispanic hero, is normally played in American movies by an Anglo actor, not by a Hispanic actor, and later Antonio Banderas would take up the mask of Zorro. And he also did like a Spanish Tarzan movie, Tarzan in King Solomon's Mines. And Lola Fawn also in a comedy, El Último Penalty, The Ultimate Penalty, And in 1986, which was 2 years after she'd made this movie, she finally was in a full-on spaghetti western, which was called Bianco Apache, the White Apache, which was directed by Claudio Fragasso and Bruno Mattei. Bruno Mattei, a legendary filmmaker. He's kind of the Wong Jing of Wong Jing's like a prolific, low-budget Hong Kong filmmaker. I think Bruno Mattei is kind of the Spanish equivalent of that. And he later directed the bodybuilding champion Lou Ferrigno in the film Seven Magnificent Gladiators. And Lola was also in a movie. Lola is cast in that film as Rising Sun. That's her character name. And she was opposite Sebastian Harrison, son of Richard Harrison, who's somebody else, a European actor who worked his way up through the spaghetti westerns, and then came over to work in Hong Kong in films like Boxer Rebellion and Marco Polo at Shaw Brothers, and then the good old IFD, International Film Distributors, Ninja movies. The same year that Lola shot Armour of God with Jackie, she did a second film with Jackie Chan called Armour of God. This was in 1987. She did another spaghetti western for Claudio Fragasso and Bruno Mattei, which was called Scalps Venganza India, like the vengeance, the vengeful Indian scalps. And later made a Czechoslovakian film, Mikola Milkolko in 1988, and since then has starred in various TV series, most memorably El Secreto. So she's somebody who had really an extraordinary career in film and in European films, and has the distinction of being the only European actress to appear in two of Jackie's films. And there was the joke at the time that probably she was the only actress they knew. I think more to the point, she was somebody who'd adapted to working with the Hong Kong acting style, the Hong Kong filmmaking style, which not all foreign actors can do. And so that's why she was called back for a second outing. By the way, these sleeveless shirts the guys are wearing, that was kind of standard stuntman wear. They would kind of wear that between takes. And here's a typical European car. Citroen, they're getting this kind of crump on this street here. This is actually in the Barrio Gothic, or the Gothic Quarter, where a lot of the exteriors were shot, because it's a very typically Barcelona-looking location. As I mentioned, Blackie Ko Xiaoliang doing all the car stunts for the film, choreographing all the car stunts, both the minor prangs like this one and all the big car stunts we see later. It was him working with the Jackie Chan stunt team to do these on location in Spain. Really, I think it was kind of like a communal atmosphere between the stuntmen and the main players, being stuck in a foreign city for this amount of time. And Jackie would do things like playing tennis in the street with his stunt team, and took loads of photographs. I mean, if you look, there's Japanese books from this era. This time, Jackie's major market outside of Hong Kong was not in the West, but it was in Japan. And so you'd have all these kind of prolific photo books showing everywhere Jackie went on location. There's probably more photographs of him from Barcelona than anywhere else, because it was so fascinating. I mean, it was so exotic to him and the rest of the team to come to somewhere like Barcelona to shoot. So there were loads of photographs. And I was just seeing the other day there was a new book that had come out, and it really showed in great detail Jackie's trip to Barcelona. Now we're about to meet some of our heavies. What they did when they came on the kind of pre-production recce to Barcelona, went to visit all of the martial arts schools to find people who looked like heavies and could also fight. And actually, martial arts are quite well represented in Barcelona. You have a Shitoryu, Karate Dojo, Kyokushinkai, Taekwondo, Jeet Kune Do, even now mixed martial arts, though I doubt they had that at the time this film was made. So they would go there and find people who could actually throw a punch or a kick. More importantly, finding people who could react, because it's actually more important to be able to react than to act. Most people actually can be taught to kick and punch. Not everybody can be taught to receive a kick or punch or get out of the way of a kick or punch with the right kind of timing. So they went around all the schools in the area finding people who, A, looked the part and wanted to be in a movie and actually could do martial arts. So this, by the way, this is a nice little gag and a very kind of Sammo moment, the keys going under the door, and it's kind of like a kind of fun beat. Sammo always has great imagination and always tries to figure out different ways to communicate. I mean, one thing would have been her yelling and screaming, and that's the way he would have known, but just by kicking the keys under the door. So it shows that she's very crafty, she's very smart, and it's a different way of getting information. Notice the way he uses these quick cuts. The reason for that is when you're fighting with somebody who's not experienced movie stuntman or martial arts screen fighter, it's very hard to do elaborate sequences. So one way of getting around that is you do quick cuts with like a single blow in each cut, and it still works, but it kind of gets around the problem of having somebody memorize and execute a long sequence of movements back and forward. Again, another chance to see the spectacular architecture of Barcelona, and full credit to the team. They actually came in and did their did their research, did their location recce, and found this wonderful kind of like picture book images of Barcelona, so that the audience in Hong Kong really appreciate the fact they were shooting on location. Sammo with a black eye, that's kind of a trademark of his. If you look at him in the final reel of Pedicab Driver, or in Slickers and Killers, even in Shanghai Express, he gets hit in the eye. He always liked to disfigure himself. And I mean, I'm sure psychologists have a real heyday about why Sammo should want to do that. But in all the movies, he always kind of thinks it's funny to get punched in the eye. And it's kind of like something that's a standard gag for him. And he always kind of comes back to that in film after film. Another thing, I mentioned before, it's kind of, I guess now it does seem odd that these two guys, a European and a Chinese person, both speaking in Cantonese, and no sense the fact that they should be speaking technically in Spanish, or actually at least in English, which would be the lingua franca of a Chinese and an English person, a Chinese and a European person talking in Spain during this era. And this was a little, very Sammo-esque sight gag. Why the nun should be quite so disturbed at the sight of a fat Chinese guy with a black eye. Your guess is as good as mine. Now, this is probably my least favourite sequence in the movie. I just want to mention the primary colours coming to the fore there. I mean, this is stuff, you say, well, they were making this film back in the 1980s, but I'm sure I saw Jackie wearing that same jacket just 2 days ago. But it's like the whole gag is really, they've hired all these extras, they've booked out a nightclub in Barcelona for the night, and the whole thing is really building towards one really not very great gag, which happens at the end of the sequence. One odd thing, I mean, I don't know how many, even in this era, how many bars and nightclubs of this type would actually have a guy in a black bow tie coming taking your order for drinks. But hey, I guess they want to show they're actually in a European location. So anyway, the whole thing is really about showing the clash between, even though these guys are three of the relatively small Chinese population of Barcelona at this time, they're showing the kind of the difference between Moby's approach and them, the fact that there's some kind of like history between the three characters and they're not really on the same team. So you have this whole routine happening here leading up to one big moment at the end. When they came through London en route to Spain, Sammo and Jackie both stayed for a couple of days. And Jackie, according to Toby Russell, a friend of mine who was very much on the scene at that time, Jackie wanted to go out to all the nightclubs in London. He was out at the Empire, Leicester Square, getting down. I think that was the name of it, getting down on the dance floor. Unfortunately, here we never get to see that. And when I first saw the movie, I was thought, oh, this is going to be fun. There's going to be like a kind of a three-way. He's going to challenge them to a dance-off, and we're going to see all three of them on the dance floor. But in fact, we never get to see it, and it just is like a lengthy dialogue sequence. It's really interesting to note when you actually shoot these scenes in a club like this, you normally don't have any music playing in the background. You actually have people doing their dialogue to camera, and everybody in the background is told to move as if there's music happening. So if you look carefully, you see everybody's moving to the beat, but it tends to be a different beat for each person. It wasn't so much of an issue on this film because they weren't shooting live sound, but that was normally is the working, because it's so noisy to actually have music cranked up in the background. I remember shooting a very similar scene for Twins Effect, and we actually put the music in later, just got the dialogue up front, and then you put the music in later, music that you've actually bought the rights to. So this is another thing was interesting is they managed to actually find all these people sit around like being extras in the background, and some of them are more dynamic than others. I've got to say, you do get people who look like they're standing there thinking, hey, I'm getting paid whatever it would be in Hong Kong dollars, $500 a night to stand here. Some of them are really into being in a movie, and some of them are kind of watching the clock and waiting till they get to go home. So you get all types. You get that here as well. Get the curse of the laughing extras. I mean, you get big action, dramatic sequences and extras laughing, which I always hate. You see that a lot of mainland Chinese movies where they've hired people. So this was what I thought was going to be the dance-off, but in fact it's very, very low-key dancing, especially compared to what Jackie was doing when he was hitting the clubs in London. Sammo didn't. Sammo liked to sleep, so he would kind of sleep in, and Jackie would be the one getting out and about and enjoying the London nightlife during this era. And they visited the offices of Golden Harvest. Used to have offices on Greek Street in London for a long time. They had like a branch office there. So they would visit the office and have meetings with David Shepard, who was the head of distribution at that time, and did some work in coordinating everybody going through London en route to Barcelona. So now we build up to the gag, which is that Yuen is going to pull the plug just as Sammo yells and screams about the fact that he doesn't like the Spanish, that the Spanish are no good, and so he get this kind of sight gag here or sound gag here of him like mouthing off when really he's not meant to. It was all building up to that, and really you could have had a phone call and got the same information across. So this particular scene, I think, probably played a lot better for Chinese audiences than it does for international ones. Another nice shot showing the different parts of Barcelona. This is actually a famous walk through the city itself. If you ever go to Barcelona, there's these wonderful walks that take you through different parts of the city, and it's like one of probably the most tourist-friendly cities in Spain, Barcelona, and with a lot to recommend it, both architecturally and in terms of things to do. And here, again, the lovely Lola Fauna. And she was like, had, as I mentioned, this great career. Notice doubling there for Jackie. Every time he slams down to the ground, it's normally Chingalok doubling for Jackie whenever he needs to land. So it's either Jackie or it's either Garlock or Yuen Bu. Again, very quick cuts because you really got guys who are not terribly experienced in taking hits. So you kind of have to do these quick cuts so that the guys, Jackie and Yuen Bu, are actually throwing their kicks and punches, connecting with them, and the guys are going down in one take. And that's really how you get around the fact that you're not dealing with experienced stuntmen. And this actually normally would be bustling with tourists and people, but they've always cleared it out for the purposes of filming. So you get this kind of fun moment here. Just want to mention the Spanish name of the movie, which is Los Supercamoristas. Los Supercamoristas. I think it should have been called that everywhere. I think Los Supercamoristas is a much better name than Wheels on Meals, and almost as good as the Japanese one, Spartan X, or the German title, which is Power Man. But Los Supercamoristas certainly rolls off the tongue and is like it refers to the fact that it specifically refers to the fact that these guys are driving around in the super van that we just saw. It's kind of fun. These outfits kind of look like Japanese sushi chefs, and it's funny because since this time in this movie, Jackie's kind of operating this traveling restaurant, and later would become a genuine restaurant owner. He was a part shareholder in Planet Hollywood, and now has his Jackie's Kitchen with restaurants in they've got one in Australia now, Hawaii, and I think Korea and Japan. But anyway, he has restaurants around the world as one of his businesses, and has different business ventures, but actually genuinely became a restaurateur. But at this time he's just playing one in a movie. Kind of fun to see all the training apparatus in the background, and there's a lot of pictures on the set. There was a picture of Richard who's in other scenes in the movie, coming to visit this particular set, even though he's not in any scenes. He was obviously in Barcelona at the same time, and so they would kind of come in and hang around, chit-chat between takes. I mean, Jackie's somebody, Benny Akides pointed this out, Jackie's somebody who loves to be around people, which is why his favourite time is on a movie, because on a movie you've always got people around. And he would even, get in the midst of a scene, Jackie, and not go home to the hotel. He would actually just sleep on the floor, on the set, and then get up kind of the next day or after a few hours sleep and get back into it again. But really, I don't think you'll ever work with anybody with more stamina and more enthusiasm for the sheer process of filmmaking than Jackie has. And he's just as happy in a trailer. In Hong Kong he doesn't have a trailer, and he's just kind of got his little tent now. Anyway, in the old days he used to just have a chair and he would sit in his chair, but now he has a little tent that he hides in between takes, but that's about it, and he's happy as can be. And I think he's less happy, when he's by himself, let's say, when he's doing other work between projects, he's kind of always looking for people to hang out, to have dinner with, and have fun with. He's such a sociable person. So for him, a movie set is the best place to be, because he has a captive audience for his funny stories and for people to talk with. It's nice, again, an example of Sammo's technique. If he has to have somebody talk, they won't just stand and talk. He'll move them and he'll move the camera. And I think this is, as I mentioned before, a persistent problem with action filmmakers, is that when you have an exposition scene, the drama just kind of stops in its tracks and the camera stops moving. And you do get occasions of that, but generally with Sammo, he tries to find a way to juxtapose the stillness with actual shots of the camera, moving the camera or moving the people around while they're delivering their dialogue, so that there is, something more interesting for the camera for the audience to enjoy, rather than just like a radio show of somebody reading out dialogue. You see here, Lola Fauna, decent actress, and particularly impressive. You've got to bear in mind that she would have been speaking Spanish, and the guys are speaking Chinese, and they're meant to be relating to each other, which would be even more of a challenge, because if either of them were speaking English, at that time, Jackie and Yuen Bu spoke basic English, and I believe Lola Fauna speaks English, so they would actually have had an idea of what the other one was saying. But for this, neither party knows what the others are saying, and they kind of have to react, imagining that they've just heard something spoken in their native language. So it's quite a challenge to do, and I don't think when you're watching the film that ever crosses your mind. So that really is testament to the acting skills of the players involved, because you could feel like it was a culture clash, and you never do. You always feel like everybody in the movie's on the same page, and I think this is, a testament to the skill they had in casting, and also Sammo as a director, in that he kind of got decent performances out of people, regardless of whether they all spoke the same language or not. Anyway, film is like a universal language anyway. No, the cute Yuen smile. I think his whole Japanese career is based on that smile. He was a huge star also in Japan at this time. You see, look at the shot of Jackie just there, and he's significantly more tanned than he was in the previous one. So here we are in the Parc de la Ciutadella, which is situated in Barcelona, with all these extraordinary statues and pieces of art in the background. And this was something that you always used to get. Barcelona is a fascinating city because it's got so many different kinds of architecture side by side. For the more complicated skateboard moves, the guys are being doubled, but they're such good athletes, they can pick up almost any kind of discipline very quickly. So the basic stuff is actually Jackie and Yuen themselves. And coming up, we're going to see them flipping here towards the Gaudi fountain in the Parc de la Ciutadella. Antonio Gaudi lived from 1852 to 1926, architect and designer, and the most internationally prestigious figure in Spanish architecture. And a double there for the flip by Lola Fauna. But this is all in the Parc de la Ciutadella. Here's the Icaria Beach, or the Icaria Beach, for these beach sequences here of them riding and walking along and the sunset. It's kind of a romantic thing, but there's actually three of them, so I guess we get the kind of the building of a kind of love triangle here. Back in the Parc de la Ciutadella, and again seeing these kind of odd pieces of sculpture in the background, and there's a double going into the water for Lola Fauna. It's always like we see a lot of the Gaudi architecture throughout the film, and he was obviously a preeminent guy at that time, a preeminent architect, and somebody whose work is one of the most memorable aspects of the buildings of Barcelona. You saw a little brief moment of Spanish there when they exchanged hola to each other. Here, also in the Gothic barrio, gotta love that yellow hat. I mean, that's something that again, trying to find ways to brighten up the screen. Primary colours were like the kind of the thing these guys liked to work with at the time. So you get the yellow van, occasional brightly coloured jackets and shirts, and Sammo wearing this particular fetching yellow peaked cap. A kind of fun shot of him propping up against the wall there. But you always get, again, as I mentioned before, the kind of the fact that these two are such good actors that you can actually believe they understand each other. When Sammo is rabbiting away in Cantonese and she's listening to him, and obviously would only understand were he to speak in Spanish or English. But it's kind of like a fun moment. And if there's one thing, you always see in Sammo's movies, women getting abused, and Sammo himself picking up various kinds of physical abuse. And again, a testament to the amount of time they spent actually checking locations in Spain, because there's a great-looking fountain and very memorable. So they obviously never settled for second best in terms of finding locations. This van, by the way, we're going to see it go leaping into action shortly. It's very much Aces Go Places in its inspiration. We'll talk about that a bit later. Aces Go Places was like a parallel action series to the My Lucky Stars movies. But I really think that the van is very much akin to something you might see in Aces Go Places, rather than the kind of thing you normally expect from a Jackie Chan Sammo Hung movie, because their movies tend to be more focused on physical action, and the kind of the gimmicks and all the tricky stuff used to be much more something that you would see in in the Aces Go Places series. Great to see these guys going to action in a European setting, and there's brief use of the bench, and again these very quick shots because they're working with these local martial artists. They did bring a stunt team with them, but obviously when you're seeing people full face, you're actually seeing Europeans. So really kind of like doubling where necessary and where not, just having these quick shots of the guys in action. But I remember when I saw the film, it was like so cool because you'd seen so many Hong Kong-based films with the guys doing action sequences. So to actually see them on location in Europe really added a fresh spin for the international audience, and of course for the Hong Kong audience, it was really something they'd never imagined. The idea of people filming on location, and Bruce Lee, of course, had paved the way with Way of the Dragon. That's great. The parking there of the van. The way they often accomplish that is actually spinning back out and then reversing the film so that you spin into your parking spot. And they're off. I mentioned before, very much like Aces Go Places, Jogai Pat Dong, which is the series of films starring Karl Mat-Gar and Sam Hoi, which are hugely popular films, were hugely popular films at the time, still are. They haven't really probably been distributed as widely as the Lucky Stars films, because obviously Jackie became a huge star, and so the Lucky Stars movies, on back of his involvement, became much more widely distributed. So you get these stunt sequences here choreographed by Blackie Ko, and it's like quite complicated stuff. I mean, using Hong Kong stunt drivers, and I believe also some Spanish car drivers were hired for these sequences, and streets being closed down. The full cooperation of the Barcelona authorities, so you could close down streets and have stunt sequences of this magnitude happening, and the flying cars. Notice, by the way, quite often you get a Mitsubishi still front and center. Here you go. This is the logo with this old lady driving a Mitsubishi. So Jackie really very loyal to his brand. And so whenever you get the chance, you got Mitsubishi on the wall earlier, and then you got like a Mitsubishi car being driven by this senior citizen. The van itself, with all its kind of tricky bits and pieces, is a real work of imagination and a lot of fun. This is leading up to one of the most widely seen shots from the film, the flying van. Notice the guys, if you freeze frame and go back, you'll notice the guys who are on the back of the loader are all Chinese, the guys who are diving and who are actually on the street, because they were all a Chinese stunt team, so everybody's Chinese. And it's great they had the timing there with the train coming at the same time. It's like one damn thing after the other. But there's like a few bloopers to be had here. Now, take a look. This is one of the most famous ones, the one everybody noticed. I think sometimes you only notice stuff on DVD. Some things you notice even when you're watching video. Look at that. The back bumper's damaged, and suddenly they're okay again. Oh, that was only a movie. It was like but it was something that people actually noticed when the film was playing in theaters, which isn't always the case with bloopers. We get now a guided tour of Barcelona architecture. Actually, geographically, it's quite a chase. If you look on the map at all the places that they drive past, it would be quite something to actually lead somebody around all these different locations in Barcelona. There's the Arc de Triomphe, built in 1888. And then the next thing we see is they're racing around, and you see everybody's in. This is the Monumento a Cristobal Colon, named after a famous ship from the Spanish-American War of 1898. That was the Nelson's column-shaped monument we saw just a moment ago. So you've got your little guided tour there, and here we are back in Aces Go Places 007 spoof territory, as they're using all of the gadgets that you have in the kind of kitchen, the mobile kitchen, to defend themselves against the bad guys. It's like very much in keeping with the kind of very physical humor of these films. I mean, even though you've got all the gadgets, it's the kind of the way that you use them. So they know they've got all the stuff there, and this using the gas cylinder and everything. Really great stunt driving, and really imaginative the way they've used all the props from the van. And this is kind of like extending what Jackie always says. He figures out an action scene when he comes on the set, sees all the props that are available, and kind of figures out what he's going to do. So it's kind of like that in this instance. They looked at the van, figured what was on board that you'd use for the process of actually cooking, and then use all that as weapons to dispose of the guys who are following them. And you kind of like, I guess you get the A-team, because you see all the guys there, you should have the A-team shot of everybody crawling out unhurt. I always thought this was a bit cold-blooded, that they kind of let Sammo go sailing down the hillside and they just kept going. I mean, you would think they would notice and pull over and go back, but I guess not. Here's a Spanish actor, Pepe Sancho, doubled by Yuen Bu, quite obviously there, actually, for the more acrobatic fencing movements. But he's an older man now, but still on the entertainment scene in Spain, and a well-known actor. And here again, doubled. When you see the fast movements there, it's really quite an evident doubling job by Yuen Bu. Yuen Bu still the double du jour, even on this film, even when you're using Europeans, when you need somebody to really come out and flip-flop and fly. And I first look at our major guys, Keith Vitale on the right, Benny Kiedis on the left. These two are going to be our main fighting villains, and they're introduced in this sequence. And very good to have. It's interesting to have two such kind of physical opposites. I mean, I think there's more of a kind of European look about Keith Vitale, and Benny's got more of the Hispanic kind of look. So here we are back in the apartment, and again, really no one's given Sammo an extra thought, even though he's one of the team and he kind of like risked his life in the van with the rest of them. No one cares about him until suddenly he pops up. Lola Fauna there wearing really the kind of the Flashdance outfit. This really is a film in and of its time. Probably the one element of it that hasn't in the least bit dated is the action. I mean, the action looks just as crisp and good as it did when it was newly minted, but the the fashions and other things and it looks slightly outdated now. I was really, but this period actually, when you looked at any of the Hong Kong films, even those shot in Hong Kong, primary colours were like really something that they liked. And I think it was, again, it played to the fact that the audience, when they went to see a film, maybe they felt their own lives were quite drab by comparison, that they were working in quite a difficult environment and their homes were not, in Hong Kong, people's homes not very big and ornate. So when you went to a film, specifically a very summer-oriented film like this, you really wanted bright colours and the fast, fun kind of kinetic energy of a cartoon. And of course, that's part of what the primary colours speak to, is the fact that you're conveying like a cartoon. You're imbuing these human figures with like a cartoon-like quality. And that's why if you look at Sammo, a lot of the times, you see him in movies wearing primary colored jumpsuits, like a tracksuit in yellow or red, because it suddenly turns him into a cartoon character. This too, a scene that could have been cut or trimmed down. It's really conveying a lot of Cantonese dialogue, which local audiences appreciate. And I know there's criticism of people trimming Hong Kong films for international release. My feeling is that if you do have long dialogue sequences that don't really play as well outside of the native territory, it's not such a bad thing to kind of like slightly amend the print to fit the market that it's being distributed in. And so in this film, really, obviously, with something like this, you're kind of like really looking for the next action beat, and that's coming up. But nice Sammo, again, with the keys, a little bit of business, kind of setting up the fact, and this kind of really unconventional use of one of the arms of the muk jong, or of the wooden dummy. But I love the way he sets it up there. You really, even though we kind of know that these guys must be going to show up because we've just seen them being sent, he manages still to find a moment of surprise for the sequence. And there's Benny's foot coming in there, and that's kind of his first technique of the movie, putting his foot through the door. And again, another chance to get a sight gag out of Sammo going down through he's never been shy about joking about his own weight. Now we get another chance to see the two guys in action and see this unique timing between Jackie and Yuen Bu. And if I had any criticism of the film, it would be I would like to have seen more sequences in which the two of them actually work together side by side, and you actually get to see the unique kind of rhythm that they've developed from all the years. And the scoring, interesting in this sequence, they had like kind of great kind of percussive beats for the sequence. And again, the guy's really picking up, the European karate guy's really picking up timing. That elbow, by the way, was my first cover I ever used of Jackie on Combat Magazine, was a shot of that cover. A nice Spanish cue here on this music score with Benny and Keith Vitale. Benny Quides, raised in a very athletic family. His mother was a professional wrestler, his father a boxer. So, no wonder he turned out to be a badass. And Keith, at one time, really tipped to be a mainstream actor. He was discovered by Priscilla MacDonald at Cannon Films, who put him in a film called Revenge of the Ninja with Sho Kosugi. And he started martial arts at a young age and was at the University of South Carolina in 1971 and achieved his black belt in just 2 years. He had a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo, but a really good kicker and a good-looking guy. Never really rose to the top rank that was expected of him. Now this, doubling for Sur, it's actually the underneath of Gaudi's Park Güell. Again, another Antonio Gaudi construction, and with really great lighting to make it look really eerie. But in reality, it's quite a relatively attractive tourist site, and they've redressed it to look like this foul underground sewer area. Again, you have to wonder, what the Barcelona tourist board thought about this, because earlier you had all the hookers, and now you've got all the vagrants underneath the city itself. There's some nice atmospheric shots of Benny. As I mentioned before, he was really forced from childhood on to become a martial arts master. All of his brothers were black belts in martial arts as well, so he kind of like was forced. He's the youngest, was forced to kind of fight for food, fight for clothes, and he had no choice but to train. And actually has earned black belts in 9 different martial arts, and is really like an all-rounder. Has his own style now called Yukido-kan. And Keith, on the other hand, I think probably had a slightly more conventional route. He was a university graduate, came out and started competing in tournaments. And these tournaments, this Keith here, these tournaments were not tournaments where you had knockouts. They weren't fighting full contact. They were like what they call points fighting, which basically is that you would execute techniques where you would kind of lightly connect or not connect at all with the opponent. But the idea was that had you connected, you would have caused certain damage. So, that was the popular tournament. That was the initial popular tournament format of that era, and so he was a champion in that, and was the world karate champion and U.S. national karate champion for 3 consecutive years. Now, I remember he told me one time he used to throw like 1,000 kicks a day. I think it was 1,000 kicks a day. Went back in his competitive career. But he was never really super flexible, Keith Vitale. He used to really have to work at it. And if you asked him to do any kind of static splits, he really couldn't. But if you asked him to kick, he could, because he'd actually worked out this kind of ballistic version of training, so he would just do all these kicks. It's kind of a fun gag here with these guys. They can't take the stink of it, and then these reaction shots of the guys. But I mentioned Paul Benny has had like a prolific career working in films, more now as a trainer than as an actor. And again, somebody who really had at one time, I think, the potential to become something like the equivalent of an American Jackie Chan, if you look at the way he was used in Force 5. But I guess the industry here we never really developed in America homegrown martial arts idols who became real, theatrical stars. It was always the highest anybody got to be was probably Steven Seagal, and below that Jean-Claude Van Damme, and otherwise it was straight to video. And so, and in the case of Keith and Benny, they never really had even straight to video careers as solo stars. So, but at least here we get to see their finest hour. Once again, the primary colours to the fore, and this is probably the great accomplishment of Gaudi, of the wonderful Barcelona architect Gaudi. This is the Temple of the Sagrada Familia, which you saw at the very beginning of the film. Gaudi was born on June 25th, 1852, and died suddenly in 1926, and had actually had ill health throughout his life, throughout his career. When he recovered from one illness, he came back and started work on the Temple of the Sagrada Familia. And it took many, many years for the actual temple to be constructed, and it's still actually under construction now, following the plans and the ideas that Gaudi had for it. He said in his kind of last will and testament, the temple grows slowly. This is the case with everything destined to have a long life. 100-year oak trees take many years to grow tall. But on the other hand, reeds grow quickly, and in the autumn the wind knocks them down, and there's no more to be said. So this was his attitude toward the work he was doing on this extraordinary building in the background. And when you look at it, actually it uses both the traditional architectural materials of stone and metal, but also plastics and lots of other materials that you wouldn't often see as in this kind of used in this kind of way. So he was really ahead of his time. The full title of the building is El Temple Expiatory de la Sagrada Familia, the expiatory temple of the Sacred Family. And it's a worldwide symbol of Barcelona, which explains why they actually shot here. And it began in 1883 on the site of a previous non-Gothic project that was begun in 1882 by Del Villar, another architect. And Gaudi dedicated his life to finishing this, and after his death, it was left unfinished, but it kind of continued. It was his idea to create a 20th century cathedral. You can still see construction work in the background, and the construction work continues to this day, and there's actually a whole website devoted to the temple. And it's really, he was trying to synthesize all his architectural knowledge with all the symbols and ideas and mysteries of faith. So I guess it's kind of like what the Masons was, the Masonic orders are seen to be like descendants of the guys that created the Temple of Solomon. So it's kind of tied in with that. And there are all these facades representing birth, death, resurrection. So very, again, almost like a Buddhist mandala idea that you're conveying some spiritual idea through an artificial construct. So this was his great dream project. And then on June 7th, 1926, Gaudi was hit by a car while crossing the Gran Via at Gerona, and 3 days later he died at the age of 74. Work continued on the building we're seeing here, and then it was interrupted in 1936 when the crypt and Gaudi's study were burnt by shelling during the Spanish Civil War, and the project resumed in 1952, and they were using like drawings and statuettes that he had actually constructed. And then from 1954 to 1976, the facade and the 4 towers of the Passion, which we're seeing in the background here, were completed. And to this day, the family of Gaudi and other interested parties are still working on further developing the temple. But this is probably its most famous. The odd thing is, if there's anything that made Gaudi famous internationally or showed his work to a huge international audience, it's probably this film. I would argue this film probably shows off Gaudi's work more than any Spanish film ever has. So something, full point to Sammo. This routine here, it's interesting. We actually had a similar scene scripted for a movie called Dragon Squad, on which I just worked with Sammo, and it was him impersonating a mad guy and acting very similar to the way he acts in this particular scene. There was actually another similar scene in Where's Officer Tuba. We ended up not shooting the sequence, or it was rewritten and shot in a different way. But it was just funny kind of seeing this played out here. And again, he's got together the flash dance headband. And another chance to see some of the unusual architecture of Barcelona. And I think there's probably no interesting building in Barcelona that goes unfilmed in the course of this movie. And that's what you're looking for, I think, when you shoot on location. And this actually not an asylum at all, but a classical building with grounds that's been converted for this purpose. Again, kind of fun. I had mentioned before seeing Jackie and Yuen Biao in disguise. And this is kind of another fun sequence. Obviously, all the scenes with Richard and John Shum shot round about the same time. These two are great double act in their own right. You see them as players in the My Lucky Stars series, but there was a spin-off where they didn't play the same characters they played in My Lucky Stars that was called Pom Pom, and they were Brainiac and Archu were their nicknames at least in the English dub version. Brainiac played by Richard and Archu played by John Shum. And these films are very popular in Japan, and the first of the Pom Pom films actually had very, very short cameos by Jackie Chan and Yuen Biao in them, and I think Sammo as well, but certainly Jackie Chan and Yuen Biao were in the first of the Pom Pom films, and they were so well received, particularly in Japan. You had Return of Pom Pom, Pom Pom Meets Mr. Boo, and a whole kind of series. And those films are kind of, I guess, not as widely seen, because after the first one, you didn't get Jackie appearing, and they were really just comedy rather than drama or action films, so they didn't have as wide of a market. But they are kind of fun films. And again, it's a very physical kind of humor that works well. And it's very much in the tradition that Stephen Chow Xing-chi, is now, it's the same vein that he's mining in terms of very physical Chinese humor. Of course, there is the Cantonese byplay or the play on word that you get from Cantonese Canto comedy, but the mole-to, the nonsense talking comedies. But also you get a very physical kind of visual style as well, and that's something that does travel and does work well. So here we get a chance to see this great double act in action, and a lot of fun always to see them. And also it's fascinating to juxtapose these two personas with the people in real life. Richard in reality, very urbane, slightly peppery character. John Shum, a real kind of activist on behalf of all these democratic causes, and you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody on screen who looks less like somebody with a political agenda than John Shum. I don't think he ever played a character who had that kind of background or that kind of attitude in a movie. Always kind of played these kind of wild types. Another thing to note about the movie is how much of it plays outdoors, because obviously shooting in Barcelona, you have this wonderful airy, sunny locations, and so they take as much advantage of that as possible. So there are really not that many, for the bulk of the film, not many interiors. You're actually shooting on location as much as you can and showing as much of the city and its surrounding beautiful gardens and scenery as you possibly can. So it's like, again, a very smart choice made by Sammo. And again, look at his kind of 1980s aerobics wear that he's got. It looks like he's ready for a Richard Simmons class there. Kind of fun. But the humor sometimes works when you kind of like have a very visual gag, like scenes when in Project A Part 2 when Jackie Chan's hiding in a painting. And some of Sammo's more sophisticated humor works really, really well. But sometimes you get kind of broad performances, and the sequence coming up here I think is a good example of where they you have performances where they're playing definitely to a Hong Kong audience who would not be really into sophisticated or kind of nuance. They really want to see these kind of really broad performances. So you get some of the Yuen Biao reaction stuff coming up. I think probably for an international audience seems really bizarre. But for a Hong Kong audience, they would go, okay, yeah, this is the style that we want to see. So this kind of playing to the love triangle that's going on here, and Paul Chan Chung there in the background. This shot particularly, I think is really kind of very broad Hong Kong comedic playing, and I don't know if you'd see in an equivalent international film somebody receiving news like this and then diving on the ground and hammering his fist and then punching somebody. And anyway, that's the style that they have here, and still kind of fun. Jackie with those sunglasses. Hardly ever see him wear sunglasses in movies, but when he's in a hot country, hardly ever see him without glasses. He has actually glasses that cover half his face. His glasses are bigger than those of Cyclops in the X-Men films. So here we are setting up again an encounter with our two bad guys. And I think actually, if you actually did a vote among the fans of Jackie as to their favorite opponent, Jackie probably would be Benny Urquidez, who's one half of this team. And I love the way they set this up. I mean, it'd be very obvious to have the two guys come out and stand in front of the van, but Sammo goes to great lengths to give it kind of this kind of anticipation. You see the hand waving and the dust coming up, so there's like a little apprehension of like, where are these guys? What's actually going on? And then Benny comes leaping in. First movie, Force 5, which was his first major role in Force 5 for Robert Klaus, which was Robert Klaus's remake by any other name of Enter the Dragon, and showed Benny, as I mentioned before, showing off the kind of moves that one might have expected that he'd become like an American version of Jackie Chan, because he had the acrobatic ability and everything else. Now here, coming up, we have one of the stunt team, Paul Wei, doubling for Chan Zhong as he's kicked back into the... If you freeze frame back there, you see Paul Wei doing the doubling for Paul Chang as he's kicked back into the van. Just now I mentioned Force 5. Keith Vitale actually started off his film career working as one of the many, many martial artists hired to work on that film, which actually starred the American karate champion Joe Louis. But the first film that really put him on the map was Revenge of the Ninja, which I mentioned he was discovered by a lady executive from Canon Films, and Canon actually made that as part of the Ninja series starring Sho Kosugi. If you ever get the chance, and the UK print of the film was severely cut, if you get a chance to see the uncut version of the movie, there's some really good stuff in there. I'm not a huge fan of ninja films per se, but there was a lot of tricky, fun stuff, and particularly a sequence when Sho Kosugi and Keith Vitale are fighting a bunch of guys in a park, like in a kiddies play park, and there were loads of cool stuff in that sequence, I remember, and it was, I think, probably, apart from his work on this movie, the best that we've seen Keith Vitale. Here's the first shot of La Rocca Castle, which is the exterior of the bad guy's lair. La Rocca Castle, also known as Santa Marti Castle. This hill is La Rocca, and it's like a reference point for the whole district of Santa Marti, and it actually dates from the 10th century, when had actually been used before that as like a lookout by Iberian and Roman settlements. And the original meaning of La Rocca is like from the Catalan dialect for the chess piece, the rook. And that's actually on the coat of arms of the village. And the local castle has been the centre of the barony of La Rocca since 1468, and they've had their own arms, which were handed down from the King of Spain to the nobility of the area. And I remember when David Carradine was telling me, when they were making a movie called The Silent Flute in Israel, and they were shooting on location on an old fort. I think it was near Tyre, but it was an old fort where the Crusaders had battled and different armies had battled over the years. And he felt that there was something gained by filming in a place where there was real history. And so I felt with La Rocca Castle, it was kind of cool that it's a real castle and it's not some mock-up like they had with Armour of God, when much of the castle was mocked up in Hong Kong on a soundstage. Here this is what you see is what you get. It's actually a real castle in Spain. Still brilliant to see this sequence here, Jackie breaking in. I remember the first time watching the movie in the theatre thinking, how much fun it was to have all these gags. the imagination of Sammo, and with all the CGI and all the other gimmicks that you can have in films today, it's kind of really fun to see kind of man against challenge, the physical challenge of breaking into the castle and the different methods these guys are going to use to overcome the castle walls. And I think probably if I mentioned before, if you actually want to go to any city in the world where you could actually go on a Jackie Chan tour, Barcelona is the place, because this place, La Roca Castle, is now, I believe, a museum with any number of artifacts from over the long history of Spanish culture to be found inside, and also has a hotel nearby as well, so it's a pretty good tourist destination. And I don't know whether they have actually Japanese. I mean, the Japanese were, for many, many years, the great fan base for Jackie and also for Yuen Biao. That was the Japanese. So I don't know if they had Japanese tours to Barcelona, but certainly it would be a really be a great idea, because you could actually go and take photos on all the places that Jackie and the gang had filmed. Unlike Hong Kong, where the sets, where locations kind of change every 5 minutes, because they kind of knock down a building and construct the new one. So it's kind of hard to find find locations people have shot at. In Hong Kong, people come here all the time asking me to show them Jackie Chan locations, and it's really hard to do because there's hardly anywhere left. Because of the fact these are all like kind of landmarks, they pretty much still stand in Spain, and you can go to Barcelona and visit them if you're so inclined. Also, I love the outfits, the 3 different outfits that the guys have for this sequence. The way they dressed up and the way that the breaking into the castle kind of reflects their different approaches is kind of fun. You can see like the mentality at work here. I love the sneaky method used by Sammo's character, who's kind of the detective who thinks he's smarter than everybody else, and the other two using their more like their physical prowess to accomplish the same goal. And he's kind of, figured to use his brains. I love the hat, by the way. There's kind of like with the ears, he kind of like, again, the idea of making a human being look like a cartoon character. He's kind of got the Snoopy ears happening with that hat, so it does gives him kind of a cartoonish quality with the round face and the ears. But here we are. This is like, real kind of Warner Brothers Looney Tunes, Acme, from the Acme company. You get the kind of the Acme toe protector, which is going to be used for a specific purpose, and it's being set up here, and he's putting the money down. It's just something very much of this era. And put a bit of power powder on the end, and bang, you're in business. I remember Jackie, when we were working on Jackie Chan My Stunts, saying that one of the most fun things he used to like to do when he was working on the set was figure out a way for him to climb with great agility, how to go up the side of a wall or between buildings, and use his specific physical skills to do that. And certainly we get to see that here. This is probably a prime example. And it was like great. You had a couple of false starts, and they're slowly making their way in. And again, this really gives a chance to show off all the different aspects of La Roca Castle, because I guess there's a certain kind of filmmaker who maybe would just give us an establishing shot of the building itself, and then you kind of be inside and start fighting. But here, because they're actually approaching it from these different angles, you actually get to see all the different kinds of architecture. This castle actually had been built on over the years, so there isn't one uniform style to it. It's actually got different kinds of architecture from different periods of Spanish history. So it's like very interesting for that reason, and certainly shown off to good effect in the sequence that's coming up. So we get to see now in this sequence our main villain, Pepe Sancho, who starred in films like Paris, the Tombouctou, and Arachnid, and was married to the singer Maria Jimenez, and they apparently had a messy divorce in recent years, and that's been kind of hot gossip news on the Spanish entertainment scene. He's actually considerably older. I mean, obviously, this film was shot many years ago now, but if you see photos of him now, he actually does look noticeably older. But he's still like a figure active on the Spanish film scene. His movies include films like La vida siempre es corta, Mar de Luna, Libertarias, Carne Tremula. He also worked on back and forth really on film and television, but really matured from being a leading man as he was at this time to being more of a character player, which he is today. And But again, a really good sport, somebody who came in and delivered in terms of working in the Hong Kong style. I mean, the Hong Kong style of acting tends to be a little bit bigger than you would find in most European films or American movies. And not all actors that come in really adapt and find that middle way between doing work that plays real for them and at the same time fulfills the demand of a Hong Kong director. And on this film, I think they really had the benefit of finding actors who could really rise to the occasion and inhabit the roles and really deliver proper performances. And he certainly does. I think he's a great bad guy. I mean, he's not a physical fighter as such, hence the fact they come up with this idea of having him as a fencing master, and he has to be doubled for quite a bit of that. But the important thing is he has kind of the physical presence to carry off that particular kind of role, so that you actually, unlike some of the movie bad guys that you see in films, the big boss bad guy is really quite unimpressive. I mean, he's just some middle-aged actor that they've dragged in to play a specific role, and here you've got somebody who actually does have a certain physical presence, and even if they're not a fighter per se, they actually come across as somebody worthy of respect and somebody who's a genuine adversary for these for the heroes, because by the end of the film we learnt these three guys can pretty much handle themselves. I love this. I thought it was such a great kind of throwaway moment. Very, very Sammo Hung. I mean, he never misses an opportunity to milk a situation for whatever he can. And I don't think there's ever a time in a Sammo Hung film when he sits back and goes, okay, that's kind of good enough. I mean, he's always looking at ways you can actually enhance a specific sequence and make it more fun. This is great. The timing here, again, very Three Stooges, slapstick. There's a great tradition, I think, in American physical comedy that's been conveyed into Hong Kong. These guys had seen Three Stooges, they'd seen the black and white comedians, and seen I mean, this is beyond the martial arts fighting, but seen the physical comedy and the interplay between the characters in those films, and kind of brought that into the films they were doing. And I think the reason that you have Hong Kong cinema being as it is that you did have this wonderful kind of crossroads of culture. From China, of course, you had the martial arts, you had Chinese opera, and you had everything coming down from the Shanghai film industry that had survived, that had been around before the war. And then, of course, you had like American and British films and European films and Japanese films all playing on screens in Hong Kong, which was like the crossroads of the world. And these up-and-coming filmmakers seeing the movies and deciding, and finding the elements they like to blend to make a whole unique dish. I mean, it's very much like Cantonese cooking. You throw everything into a wok, whip it up, and there you are. And these guys are really cool. Look at, on either side of the table, Keith Vitale and Benny Akides in their white outfits, looking way cool. A little gag here about the Year of the Lamb. But I mentioned before, Keith Vitale, one of our bad guys who's sitting next to Jackie in this sequence, he also starred in a number of films produced by a Hong Kong company that was shot in the West. Seasonal films. Bey Logan, who discovered Jackie and launched Jackie's career in Snake and the Eagle Shadow and Drunken Master, subsequently discovered Jean-Claude Van Damme in the film No Retreat, No Surrender. And it was kind of a law of diminishing returns, because No Retreat, No Surrender is still very much the best of the seasonal international films. So they were kind of constantly trying to find new talent and trying to do American-style films that never quite connected. They never really looked like Hong Kong movies, and at the same time they never really looked like American films. So they did No Retreat, No Surrender Part 3, American Kickboxer, and Super Fight. Sorry, No Retreat, No Surrender 3 and Super Fights were films that Keith Vitale was in for seasonal films. He was also in a film for Distant Horizon called American Kickboxer, which was shot on location in South Africa. Somebody who you really would have thought would have had a shot at making it into the front rank of action guys, but it never really happened for him. And, no accounting for that. I think there was maybe a sense that he was slightly limited in terms of his acting. Sammo using his this kind of trident as a guando, a Chinese weapon, and kind of Sam always looking at ways to use traditional kung fu in a modern setting, and this is a great way of doing it, because you're actually in a medieval castle, so you've got kind of the equivalent weapons, but he's using them. Double there for the fallback on the ground. I think it's Garlock going back there to double for Jackie for that particular thing, and Benny coming into action here, looking fantastic as he always does. And Keith now kind of still teaching martial arts, but pretty much retired in terms of doing movie work and still in terms of doing films. But he's kind of like still on the scene in the martial arts world and various other business ventures, and based in the South. He's originally from South Carolina. The setting really example now of like when you come onto a set, figuring out how to use every part of it for some kind of acrobatic or physical display. So the table, later we get them fighting among the kind of the soft chairs, and now this kind of back and forward here. That's another great shot of Jackie as he's turning there with the kind of that great mane of hair. And Benny performing Benny's such a great all-rounder. I mean, I guess his trademark technique is that spinning kick. He got his nickname The Jet from the song by Elton John, Benny and the Jets. So he became The Jet, and he performs his kind of flipping, kicking movements, takes off like a jet. So that was hence his nickname. And perfect physical foil for Jackie. I mean, they're around about the same height, same weight, and, definitely in the same league physically. Very hard for Jackie to find somebody who could really fight like Benny can, but at the same time has that timing, the sense of doing movie timing. But I guess it shows, what Sammo brought to the table is that Benny really looks fantastic in this film and in Dragons Forever, the second film where he and Jackie Chan fought. But in the other movies he's made in the West, he's never really reached that same level of physical dexterity. So even though he's a terrific martial artist, you still need somebody like Sammo to make you look great. Mentioned before, Pepe Sancho, not really a physical fighter in the way the other guys are, but he has that presence as an actor that he can carry it off. But for all the sequence here, you see him in the close-up, and then every time Sammo is reacting to the guy with the foil, it's always Yuen Biao, the hard-working Yuen Biao, hardest-working man in Hong Kong film industry, because, I mean, he was acting in roles and also basically doubling anybody who needed a double under any circumstances, and quite a challenge. So here we get a chance. I think it's a shame. I look at this. Sammo never did a full-on kind of Zorro movie or Scaramouche or a Three Musketeers film with swordplay because he's so brilliant. Even here in this kind of unfamiliar terrain of Olympic-style fencing, he can really come out and do fascinating, good work and make it look really exciting. And as exciting, it's like when they did the Musketeer, and Hung Yan did all the swordplay for that. It worked really, really well. So, you can't say, wow, because these guys are from Hong Kong. They'll look at any fighting format, any style of combat at all, and make it look good for screen. And this is an example I hear of Sammo doing just that. And then really going as far as he could with the fencing, and then bringing in the idea of, okay, we're going to kind of juxtapose Chinese martial arts against European martial arts. I'm going to have like this kind of traditional double, and the opera beats of music coming in, and he's doing the double sword style against the fencing. This sequence actually cut down in the international print of the film, and here's these two guys going at it. Of course, Benny, really active behind the camera in films, working at Roadhouse and Con Air as trainer for the actors. And he's somebody, really knew how to take a punch. We always just joke he could kick the other way and the candles would come back on. But I guess that wasn't that kind of film, so they didn't want to do that. But Benny with his kind of, I never liked Jackie using the chair. I always feel if you've got him that he's not depicted in this movie as the kind of guy who would pick up a chair and slam it on somebody's head when he was losing the fight. But I guess that was just kind of spur of the moment in the midst of combat. He grabbed the chair and does that. But Jackie, when they first started fighting, Benny was hitting him a few times, and he says, you hit me one more time, you're not going to work in this business again. And there was a running gag throughout the film that they were going to have a real fight and for charity. But at the end, Jackie kind of gave Benny a hug. He said, just kidding. But he got all the crew going. He was saying, we're going to have a fight, and we're going to bet, and we're going to do this. And Benny was like, man, I do this for a living. I think you're fantastic in films, but if you fight me for real, then, you're going to get hurt. The same ploy of mentally preparing by pretending it's a training session, Jackie would later use again when he fights his student Brad Allen in the movie Gorgeous, Bo Jun. So he's always take good ideas and reuse them in different films at different times. But it was this is kind of fun. He obviously is an opponent who he can't beat, really cannot defeat fist for fist. So he really has to use mental prowess to kind of outmaneuver him. And Benny actually began his full contact career back in 1974, and he had a record of over 200 wins, no losses, 63 title defenses, 57 knockouts, and the only fighter to retain 6 world titles in 5 weight divisions for 24 years. Amazing. He's actually my son's godfather, so he's got that further glory to his name. He's the godfather of Ryan. And also an interesting career in film. I imagine he worked on Force 5, where he blew everybody away when he came into audition. And he worked on a movie called Kick Fighter in the Philippines, where he fought Richard Norton, another old friend of mine. And also made a movie called Blood Match, which was shot in a day. It was a movie shot in one day by the director Albert Pyun when they had film scratched on the set of Kickboxer 2, and they had the insurance money. They spent the insurance money shooting a whole new film in one day. Probably his best role is with his student John Cusack in Grosse Pointe Blank, where he plays Felix Lapoubelle, and they have an amazing fight scene. And you can see him fighting Shannon Lee, daughter of Bruce, in And Now You're Dead. And he was actually training Michael Biehn for the movie Dragon Squad, a movie that I just completed a few weeks ago. But Michael wanted to learn martial arts before coming out here to work with Sammo, so we sent him to the Jet Center, which is Benny's center in L.A., and of course, Benny did a fantastic job training him. Though we didn't actually have Michael do that much martial arts, but I think, again, it helped sell Michael as somebody physically, as an actor. Now, Benny really took that hit. He stuffed his mouth as cotton wool and hit him, had everybody pulling him on the wire. Chingarlock, one of the stunt members, chain-smoking away as he was pulling, and Benny always thought that was funny, this amazing stunt guy who would be chain-smoking as he was pulling the wire to get him to kind of fly through the air in reaction to the punch. But he actually... all this sequence here where you see Jackie hitting Benny, Benny's really getting hit, and he would kind of put cotton wool on his cheeks and allow Jackie to wail away. I always thought this was kind of Raging Bull style with all the sweat coming off there, and you really feel it, you know. Quite obvious pads for some of the moments we're seeing here. There's really obvious pads underneath the shirt of Benny. But I guess, in the heat of the moment, you don't really notice that much. But it's like really... because he was taking some serious shots to the body, and I guess take after take after take, it starts to wear. So whereas on the chin, you really had to take it in the face, bang. And this was like, again, going back, getting caught, and great end to the fight. Benny remembers a line of dialogue after this when he got pulled up, and Jackie says to him, "Oh, you're better than me," and they got cut out. But he remembers also Jackie giving him Jackie's own personal bag that he brought to set every day with all the stuff in it. And at the end, Jackie so appreciated Benny's work, he gave him that bag as a present. Now the next round with Keith Vitale. I mentioned before Keith Vitale making films for Seasonal, and the last of the films he made for them was Blood Moon with my old friend Gary Daniels, and he had a small role in Blood Moon. He also starred in another picture with Michael De Pasquale and Joe Lewis, which is called The Cutoff, which I think really would be up there as the worst film of all time if Ed Wood is taken out of the equation. But this is kind of him seeing him better days. And again, Keith never really got the shot he deserved, and there was talk about him doing television series and doing various other kind of projects, but nothing really came together. He didn't quite have the timing down that Benny had, so he didn't get as much to do in the film. And people always ask me, when they say, well, when I do a movie in Hong Kong, how much do I get to do? And I'm like, well, you can get to do as much as you can do. I mean, they really want to show you at your best, so whatever you can do, they'll let you do. The problem is a lot of real martial artists aren't that great in film. This is so funny, them sitting like in a gentleman's club, taking a breather between rounds. I always thought this was such a great gag. And this is actually a real pot, and Keith said he saw they had a whole bunch of them kind of to test drive to see which one he could actually take upside the head, and he rung his bells for a while, actually having repeated pots smashed over his head. So here back in the fencing, and Yuen Biao looking at Yuen Biao, as you actually have Yuen Biao doubling there for Pepe Sancho, and then walking into shot. So the three, and this to me is the ultimate, this is how we want to remember the three brothers doing kind of like all for one and one for all. And this is like, the glory days of Hong Kong action cinema. Sammo, Jackie, and Yuen Biao. And, all for one, one for all. There's no escape. Look how messed up Sammo is. He loves doing that to himself. Bloody, bruised, but unbowed. And that's it. Boom. And now back at the Fai Chan chair, the flying kitchen. And it's kind of fun. Look at that top. That's really from Fame. Remember the TV series Fame? It's the kind of thing Leroy would have worn in Fame, as worn by Yuen Biao. But they came over here and came through Carnaby Street, came to buy stuff in these are kids from the orphanage from the opera school, which is like the same as an orphanage in Hong Kong, and they come to the West and it's like, yes, now we can wear what we want, we can buy clothes, we can wear funky sunglasses. So they went for it. So we have this kind of Cinderella in reverse as this girl coming back from her wealthy upbringing, but she'd rather stay and work with her two friends and live life here in the Pueblo de Español. Good for them. And a fun ending to a classic movie. Isn't it a blast? It really is. Just to see this combination of these great actors, comic stylings, acrobatic humor, slam bang martial arts, all set against this amazing architecture of Barcelona. I mean, the film not only works as a shining example of Hong Kong action comedy at its finest, but also as a tourist attraction for Barcelona. I think they should, the Barcelona Tourist Association should show this to anybody planning a trip to the great city. So works on all those levels, and it's been so cool to see it again. I mentioned before, different versions of the film exist, and on this print we get to see the more international version. The Japanese print, apart from having different music, also had outtakes at the end, which was like a contractual obligation that the outtakes are so popular with Japanese audiences, you had to have outtakes at the end of a Jackie Chan movie. So even movies like First Mission, which when you normally see them in the West don't have outtakes, you actually get to see them they had special ones edited in for the Japanese release. So I'm presuming they're elsewhere on this disc. If not, you have to buy the Japanese DVD. And these kind of like credits for the major Spanish actors. And rounding out one of the more extraordinary moments in the history of Sammo Hung, Jackie Chan, and Yuen Biao. It's kind of their penultimate three-hander, because there are other films where they're like kind of teamed up, but it's not really the three of them. So you had this, and later, Dragons Forever. And then, to this day, I guess, we're all waiting for their big reunion when they actually get together to do yet a Shigeru Ishihara there getting his credit. He was the skateboard double for both Jackie and Yuen Biao for any scenes when they were doing really extraordinary skateboard stunts. Here's all and what a great job they did. This is the Barcelona crew who would have allowed for all of the stuff to be shot on location in the city. Bey Logan signing off. M'gai.